So Sunday afternoon, I was walking in the park, listening to a podcast, and I got a text, and it said, Kobe Bryant died in a helicopter crash. And at first, I just assumed it was a joke or not a joke, but a hoax, because it just didn't seem possible, especially because he had been in the news the night before, because LeBron James had passed him on the all-time scoring list. So I pull up the ESPN app first because I'm like, I'm not going on Twitter. This is obviously where this is coming from. So I go on the ESPN app, and Kobe is mentioned twice, but it's all with LeBron James. So as this story is breaking, ESPN has LeBron passes Kobe. So I go on Twitter, and I see that Adrian Wojnarowski has said that he died in this crash. And so I knew it was real immediately. But I'm in this park. It's a Sunday afternoon. People are playing soccer and football and basketball. And I suddenly feel like I'm living in a different reality than everyone else there, because I know that almost all the people there are sports fans, and that this is going to really affect sports fans because of what Kobe Bryant meant as an image over the last 2 decades. And I was living in a reality that Kobe Bryant no longer existed, and everyone else at the park was living in a reality where he did exist. And it was a very surreal moment to feel like that reality had split, even though all of those people would eventually rejoin in my reality.
Whoa. That hits. Well, we'll do the intro here. I'm Quinn.
I'm Derek, and welcome to the Denverse. When we've been talking about this podcast, I've never thought that we would probably spend so much time on someone that never played in Denver, doesn't live in Denver, and really has almost no connection to Denver other than causing misery in a lot of different ways, and being in the national spotlight from Colorado. But that's sort of where we are and everyone else is, and I'm sure a lot of people out there are sick of talking about Kobe Bryant, but just how monumental of an event this has really been interesting to follow.
Yeah.
How did you find out about Kobe?
Quite simply, my mom just texted me, was like, Kobe died in a helicopter crash. And yeah, same thing, just the phrase itself is so intangible.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at this point, at 27, we live in a world where there's more celebrities than there ever has been. You just know of more people existing. And by that token, there's been more people who've died. So I have had oh my God, I know exactly where I was when Michael Jackson died. I know exactly where I was when Prince died. Yet, Kobe, I think by being an athlete, especially, he was in the news the night before because of LeBron. That disconnect was so hard. And so, I went on Reddit first, and what is so weird is that it was a TMZ report, which made it feel like TMZ does not get this wrong. And there's no one of credentials who would report this if there was any chance that it wasn't the truth. But it's just such a weird set of circumstances that then colored my entire day and most of my day Monday and a lot of last night and right now. Just the fact that the Nuggets game was the first NBA game played just something about 3 or 4 hours after his death was announced.
And really a half hour after that Wojnarowski tweet. So it was right away almost. And we saw players being informed on the court. I'm sure you saw the video of Murray finding out on the court that Kobe Bryant, whose camp he had attended, had died. So on this episode, we're really going to talk about how this death has shaped the last week.
Mm-hmm.
And then we are going to have a Denver Stories episode come out where we talk about Kobe Bryant's relationship with Colorado and the Denver Nuggets as a villain in many ways. And so this is not an episode to diminish the transgressions that have happened here in Colorado, where we know about this differently. And I listened to all of Sandy Clough's show on Monday. He had George Karl on. He had Matt Moore on. He talked a lot about a lot of things, and he said In any other NBA market, they're having a completely different conversation than we are today. And that was the thing. And we see this with celebrity deaths. Everyone wants to say, how did this affect me? Like, they turn it back on me. Like, I remember this. And here in Colorado, Kobe Bryant was the top story for 2 years for something that he did off the court in Eagle, Colorado, a place that anytime I drive through Eagle, Colorado, I immediately think of Kobe Bryant because of how prominent the events were. And we're going to tackle all of that in the Denverse Stories episode.
Yeah, so I think in a lot of ways there's reverence for the person that he was as an athlete and even beyond that. But I think our Denver Stories and the conversation is not so much about honoring him, but there's no way not to remember him.
Yeah.
When we talk about celebrity deaths, there's always that person who's like, you didn't even know them, blah, blah, blah. Why don't we care about soldiers or scientists or teachers the same way? And it really just is an impact. And we can't choose the things that have impact on us. But we're here to kind of process that, especially from the lens as two people who were never fans of Kobe Bryant. If someone gave me a Kobe Bryant Lakers jersey, I would have no idea what to do with it. I'm too cheap to tear it up. But this is a conversation that I think is different than a lot of other markets.
And I think it was so interesting because it was so clear that this was so much bigger than, it made all the national news. We've seen, the problems with that. We saw the errant ABC News report that all 4 of his daughters had died in the helicopter crash when it turned out that just one of his daughters had.
Well, then there was a report right after. It was like, none of his daughters died, only then flip.
Yeah, it was a mess there. There were clearly, I'm sure you saw the reporter that said Nakers that people were very upset about. And I will say, I think she is about my age. She's a weekend anchor on MSNBC, and no news is supposed to break on Sunday. That's why you put her there.
Yeah.
Because she's learning how to do this. I'm not sure she'd ever said the word Lakers in her life.
There was like the Twitter thing a couple years ago. It was like, do you hear Yanny or what was the other one?
I don't know, but I know what you're talking about. It was the blue dress of sound.
Yeah, blue dress of sound, and I had very clearly heard the racial slur first, but then when using a little bit of critical thinking, I went back and listened to it, and it totally sounded different. Sorry, lady. There's no way to escape it, because it's just like, when something that had that much gravity, there's just something that was like silly, and you could process some of your like disbelief and anger into her mistake, as opposed to wrapping your head around the idea that this icon, this very complicated character, is now dead. In these conversations, we can just pile on to the no-name weekend anchor for her very unfortunate slip.
Who's used to getting about 50,000 viewers and suddenly has millions of viewers.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting thinking about which deaths were most like this that have happened within our culture. I heard several names thrown out. A lot of people talked about when Magic Johnson talked about getting HIV.
Which at that point felt like a death sentence.
Yeah, that was to a lot of people the same as this. It was like he was a walking dead man. With some hindsight, we know that's not true. There was Roberto Clemente, the Pittsburgh Pirates player. He was about 38 years old, still playing at the time of his death. He was on a mercy mission delivering aid, and his plane went down on, I believe they said it was on New Year's Eve or around New Year's Eve. So shocking news there. I think personally, the only death that we've had that is similar to this as a Denver sports community as a whole was Darren Williams' death.
Yeah. It was also New Year's Eve.
And just a shocking moment where we had this great rookie, all the promise ahead, so excited about him, and he was gone. And he was gone in a place that both of us have been so many times, like Spear Boulevard.
Yeah.
I think that one was really hard, but it was sort of the opposite of this, where his whole playing career was ahead as opposed to behind.
Yeah.
The cultural person that I thought was interesting relating to this was John Lennon, because he was still someone that was doing things. He wasn't with the Beatles anymore. He was a little over 10 years removed, but he was such a big personality that everyone knew who he was.
Mm-hmm.
And when he was shot, coming out of his apartment off Central Park, and the reverberations of that, I believe they announced it on Monday Night Football. There was a sports aspect to that. So, of the people that reach more than just like the fandoms, I think that those were some of the more interesting ones. Obviously, Michael Jackson and Prince,
Mm-hmm.
I think, had that cultural touch point, but not in the way that Kobe Bryant did.
I think, well, for our generation, those were just some of the people.
Yeah.
And it's and it's hard to just, with, say, Darren Williams being shot and killed after a fight at a New Year's party, and even John Lennon, like an assassination, there's a way to make sense of it more because, like, oh, a killer killed them. It's just the phrase, Kobe Bryant died in a helicopter crash. It's just so odd. Although, like, looking at the stats, helicopters are 18 times more dangerous than LA traffic, which you assume is more statistically dangerous than other places. But I mean, it's like so quick, so inglorious, and then all of a sudden it's like, wow, now we have to hold space for all of this. Yeah, but he transcended culture in a way, because a lot of conversations just around, for our generation, we didn't get to see the greatest era of Michael Jordan. Like most of us, if we got to see him play, it was probably when he was a Wizard.
Yeah, I remember. Actually, one of my first vivid sports memories was Michael being down in that Jazz series and hitting that shot, and that was the first time that I realized that there were athletes that could do something like that, because just the magnitude of that moment. But then we had Kobe Bryant, the three-peat, and then everything else that came after that.
Well, to that point, we just got more of Kobe, and for me, he was like the first superstar that I saw in person, and one of the first characters that, like, I knew to hate.
Mm-hmm.
But he transcended the game in so many ways. Like, Kobe Bryant brought the afro back, and like, he was one of the first players to just have an afro hairstyle. And I remember in second grade growing one out, my teacher being like, "Oh, you trying to be like Kobe, huh?" I was like, "No, but kinda." And seeing just like how it poured in. By the time Kobe was big, the NBA had become a truly global game, and there was a lot of talk about how people may be mourning harder in some places, like basketball courts in Shanghai and Beijing and Manila, even more than outside of LA. And then, like, the Grammys, they had to change the opening of the Grammys to talk about Kobe because they were in the Staples Center. And there's only so few places in sports, I think, that you can really say, like, that this player built. Like, Gillette Stadium is the house that Tom Brady built. And wherever the the Capitals play, that's the place that Ovechkin built.
Mm-hmm.
And the Staples Center, one of the most well-known arenas in the world, that's Kobe Bryant's domain. And think about LA as, like, incongruous of a city it is. Kobe was a true LA celebrity. So it hit a lot of people in a lot of different ways and totally colored the conversation. I mean, it's Super Bowl week, and this is arguably one of the best matchups that we've gotten in a while, and the conversation is still, I think, muted in a lot of ways because you can't ignore the absence in the sports universe.
One thing that was also interesting was that the Nuggets-Rockets game was the game on Sky Sports, which is the England and Europe's sports channel. And so the whole Nuggets game was on overseas already. And so a lot of the tributes from around the world were actually them watching the altitude broadcast, which we can't see on Comcast. And Vic Lombardi, who was on the game, actually went on the BBC on Monday to like do an interview because they were the voice that was relaying the story in the way that we think about the people breaking in to talk about O.J. Simpson's car chase in sports, and those big voices.
Wow.
So it really did become Denver centric, and probably the most forgettable Big Nuggets game in recent memory, where even the players were saying, "I don't remember taking shots." Like that's what Michael Porter Jr. said after the game.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that is, I think a lot of Kobe Bryant's legacy building intentionally after the allegations in Eagle, Colorado, was that he really in the last decade has made an effort to reach out to young players, make sure that they all had a connection to him in some way. I mean, when you talk about the Nuggets players, Porter had a connection to him. Murray went to his camp. Morris talked about the time where Kobe Bryant recognized him at a basketball game at the Staples Center last year. Will Barton talked about after the first time he played Kobe, Kobe talked to him for an hour about how he could improve his game and how Barton wanted to be better for Kobe. So Kobe Bryant really wanted to be that ambassador in the NBA, in the WNBA, where he was really a strong presence, and in college basketball, a lot because I think he was seeing that he needed to grow the game for his daughters. We don't know how much guilt played into any of this, but it all really did build up where he still wanted to be in the center of the conversation.
Yeah, and it's living in this era. We're just more attuned to the transgressions of our heroes, and the ability to forgive has shifted. But there was a Dave Chappelle joke around the time. It's like Kobe played for his freedom, and in a lot of ways, and not saying it's right or not, he transcended the cloud over him by just bawling the hell out and really like then lifting up so many others around him.
And the other thing that is so interesting is that people seem to remember almost the end, like the last two championships and on of Kobe. Like that is how he's been remembered. We have heard almost no talk of when he tried to get traded in 2007. We have heard almost no talk of him forcing Shaq out of the Lakers. Like the closest I can think of is the way that Steve Jobs apparently was the last time he came to Apple. But people still remember the Steve Jobs the first time when he started Apple, where he was irrational and all over the place. But then apparently later in life, he like settled down a little bit and he started like reconciling some of his problems. That to me was the interesting thing, was that we're remembering the Kobe that I think he completely manufactured. He knew what he was doing.
I don't think there's anyone who gets that level of fame, success, and wealth where there's not a narrative being created around and for them. And again, we'll talk about more like our relationship to Kobe as Denverse sports fans in our stories episode. But he just played such a huge role in terms of being the villain to other teams, but then also being revered by those same fans, to the point that he got to have a year-long goodbye tour, and ESPN replayed his 60-point final game, and it was hard not to watch that, all things considered, and feel moved and inspired. And that's really why we mourn people we've never met, because their myth, like the narrative that he created, becomes something that we can hold on to and lift us up. And
we're creating gods in our own time.
Exactly.
And that's why this has been such an altering week, because we don't think that the gods can die. It'll be interesting to see how he's remembered going forward, because there has been all of the normal fighting over immediately praising him and then immediately the backlash to the praise and the way that we fight about everything. And I think this is a lesson in it is uncomfortable to hold two opinions at the same time that are contradicting.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is really what we have to wrestle with Kobe Bryant. And I think that is what we'll continue to wrestle with.
Yeah, and well, rest in peace to all 9 people who lost their lives. Certainly, thinking about his daughter has been one of the, I think, the more pure ways to look at the tragedy and grieve. Because I think for all of us, like, I don't care who my child is, they're gonna learn how to throw a punch, fix their own bike tire, and how to shoot a basketball and throw a football. And that's what I got to see a glimpse of that through the memorializing of him and Gianna.
Well, and the other interesting thing about that is that he was basically done with basketball, and she was like, "No, I like basketball, and so I'm gonna bring you back into this."
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is the other thing that I think was good about all of this is that he was living for his daughters instead of having his daughters live for him, which we see backfire so often with star parents and their children.
Yeah.